The freaking cat purring. Okay, so I was told when the cat purrs, it's supposed to vibrate in the controller. Now I think about it, the controller is not vibrating. The cat's definitely purring. Unless it's supposed to be in-game, maybe when the cat purrs. You know what? Isn't that vibration even on in the first place? Yes. Okay. Weird. Well. Yeah, I don't know what's with that then. Unless maybe I just never noticed it, which is definitely entirely possible. Oh wow, it's loading in still. Gotta give the game just a second here. Usually like takes a second for the game to actually fully load in before the frame rate kind of fully levels out. I think it's good now. Alright, so I gotta talk to this guy. I'm supposed to find Clementine. Hope nothing's happened to her. Man, I kind of forgot where I left off here. I know when I logged off the game, there was like a bed that I slept on. I can't remember where that even was. I don't think that was quite here. Where do I go from here? Do I go across this way? I think so. Also, I don't know if it's me. It looks like, according to OBS, looks like the game's not too loud, but it almost sounds louder than it was last time I played this. Food's horrible, it's the only thing around. I didn't even jump up here. Ramen J45, the secret ingredient? What's the secret ingredient, though? I don't think they'd actually cook anything. Yeah, there's just wires. I think it's like wires and oil. I don't even think there's actual food there, to be honest.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
No, Patrick.
Mayonnaise is not an instrument. Horseradish is not an instrument either.
Oh, hey, there's that bed. This is where I left off. Okay, so I was like literally right above where I paused before. So I knew I was kind of close there. Let's see, then you know what? Let me actually turn down the game music just a tiny bit, because it seems like that is actually quite loud. I think it's just the music volume, to be honest. And I don't think it was that loud before. That's still actually kind of loud. Yeah, that's a little bit more normal sounding. Because like I was hearing, it's like, it was even loud in my headset. It's like, I could have sworn it wasn't that loud last time I played this. But it might have been. Either way. Alright, so where was I supposed to go from here? I mean, I guess I could technically zoom out and really see where I'm supposed to go. I think I'm supposed to go down this way, actually. Hello? Haven't had visitors since the Zerks. Imagine we can harness the power of the Zerks. And we're running a wheel. Good old hamster wheel for him.
How are you liking this game?
Yeah, I'm freaking loving it, honestly. You haven't like missed like really anything. I just switched over to this. All I've done is just jump down the like 2 floors. But yeah, I was more than ready. And I noticed when I thought about it, when I was loading in, because it was purring while I was loading, I was paying attention to that. The controller was not vibrating, actually. Now I'm thinking about it, the vibration setting, it definitely 100% is on. But I haven't noticed any vibration, and that threw me off, because like I know the controller vibrates, because like if I plug it in, I mean it vibrates. I know it does it. I know it does it. Should be able to transfer that info through the controller, because I feel like it does in other games. I think. You know, now I'm thinking about my racing games. I don't know, actually, when I think about the other ones. No, it's vibrating now. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you could... Yeah, you could hear the rumble from that. I was like looking at OBS, like, was that even picking up? So yeah, like it vibrates there, but I didn't notice it in the menu. So maybe it's just at other times. It threw me off like when I tried to pay attention to that. Electric circ everywhere. Oh, I can jump up here? Wait, hold up. What's up here?
It's more noticeable on the PS5.
Oh, probably. I guess that would make sense with like the haptic feedback. So like it does do it in the loading screen? Because on here, nothing. So that could be what it is. It could be like a haptic vibration versus this being just regular vibration. Because this is the Xbox One controller. But like, it's like probably one of those slightly older ones. Hold up, I'm gonna knock this over. And walk up to it. Push it right over. Whoop, almost had it. Right there. There we go. All the way down there by the river. Of course, I gotta bop this one in. I love the fact that then there's the part of me that's like, I actually gotta like look over the edge too, like a cat would after they knock it over. What do I think about that? Can I knock this one over? Oh, yes, I can. Even though he's actively using it. Imagine if a cat just walked up to your paint can and was like, fuck you and your paint. I would just... Meow. But you love me. Meow. It won't let me talk to them now. I think, needless to say, I think they're a little annoyed with me. Oh, I can go up here. Oh, hey, I didn't know that was path. Hello.
This was my
Soothing
favorite
sound of
part
trash
in the game.
falling. Your favorite part? I was gonna say I didn't know I could like mess up their game there. I was like I just jump up there, maybe I would just carefully step around it. Nope, just jump up there and just whoosh, not today. Wait, so do they actually put it back together, or are they just walking through the animation here? I'm watching this other robot. Okay, no, they're walking through the animation. I wasn't sure if they're gonna like actively like slowly put it back together, so like I could just wait and just mess it up again. Oh, okay, I can actually jump down here? I don't know, I could go down here. I mean, I guess there's not a whole lot down here. Still can knock the cans over, or the bottles. I didn't hear a break. Oh wow, that is a strong bottle, wow. I thought for sure that would like shatter by the time it hit like all the way down there. I don't have to do this, but I have to do this. There we go. Good to go. Alright, so where am I actually supposed to go? Follow the lights. Meow. It's so kind of funny. Every time I stream, my cats disappear. But like, if I'm not streaming, freaking all three of them will be hanging out right here every time. Like I have to go find them, physically drag them in here. Or open a can of wet food. That'll probably do the trick, actually. Can I climb in here? My kid wouldn't try to climb in there. Oh, I can go through here, though. The echo. Suddenly started getting creepy out of nowhere. Am I supposed to go? Oh, wow. I somehow did not see that giant freaking hallway there. Keitha! What's up? How you doing? Freaking, I've been loving this game, though. Well, one of my buddies actually let me borrow it off wow, I can't talk. One of my buddies let me borrow it off of Steam, and like, oh shit. Okay, so I gotta like be careful about that. Wait. Hold up, what?
Have you downloaded Horizon?
Does this? I think that did finally finish downloading. Why is this not working? Alright. Alright, okay, I feel like I'm not supposed to go that way. Maybe? Oh, then again, wait a minute. Because unless... I'm sure it's gotta be like before. I gotta block that off with something. It's weird that it doesn't spin until I walk up to it, though. So if that's the case, is there something that I can bite onto? Right, just...
Meow-mo.
Meow meow, what's up, Willow? Freaking love that they have the meow button on here, and like that I just found out that there's like echoes in here that are a thing. Can I go through this way? No. I totally forgot I can run this whole time. I am lost? Unless like I was supposed to... Wait, hold up. I have a buddy that can help me. I'm supposed to ascend to Midtown, so... Yeah, I don't even... Once again, I don't even know if I'm going the right way. Unless...
TTS sounded
Maybe,
like it was saying Elmo.
Elmo? You know, I thought it sounded a little funny. So the outsider has been expecting you to use meditating top of a village. Maybe I'm supposed to go up there first. You know, because now I think about it, I went down instead of going up. I should have gone up. At least I already know the track. Oh, hey!
I
guys are
misspelled the
back.
second meow.
It'd be a shame if I jumped up there
Did
again.
you get the meow achievement? LOL, I think it's like
in the first 10
meowing
minutes?
100 times in the first 10 minutes
Oh.
XD.
I didn't know it was in the first 10 minutes. Because I saw that on Steam. I didn't know it was in 10 minutes though. I was like, how did I not get that? So that means I didn't meow enough. Damn it. Wasn't catty enough for the cat club. So,
Something
I guess now
like
look
that.
at you. I guess you did misspell it. I didn't even notice that. Unless I just haven't meowed 100 times, but I doubt that though. Because to be honest, like I've meowed so much. Also, I'm gonna cause some chaos real quick again. Meow. I find it funny, the cat just, you can tell the cat is just like, I wasn't supposed to do that, was I? But, no, like I saw there was a few other achievements too. I'm kind of curious, like, I don't know if it would count like if I started a new game to like try to get that achievement, just to get it, or like if I have to completely like, well, I already talked to this guy, or if I would have to completely like uninstall or reinstall type of thing, like if it would know type of thing. Says, see, like, I tried not to wear it out, but I definitely hit it a lot. I think the text-to-speech died there. Hold up, why did text-to-speech just die on me? 2 seconds. Yeah, I don't know why it died. Still up on there. Let me refresh that page, because this is like a separate, like, actual, like, web page I use for my text-to-speech. Yeah, it died on me. So now I gotta actually physically pay attention. Now I gotta do work. Alright, wait, hold on. It said end tab. I was not reading that at all in the slightest bit. What am I supposed to do? Right, Clementine, hope it's nothing's happened to her.
I think
Climb
it
the top of her
is the same
village, reach
TTS site.
path to Midtown. Oh, okay, I got you. Oh, okay. Okay, now it's working. So, what's it called? It's like speech chat or something like that. As far as I know, it's the only one besides, like, there's people that, like, they'll have, like, the, nice. There's, people that use, whoops! No! Oh, it worked. I have a cat and I can jump through the floor. Alright.
Did you see the sleeping achievement?
Sleeping achievement? No. Wait. Do I have to sleep for a certain amount of time? Because I've slept at
wild
2 different
Marin
cat
appears
beds.
packet using
I found 2
contact
cat
when
beds and I made sure to
revealed
zoomed out
90s.
all the way on those. An exclamation point Pokecash. And good to go. But yeah, like the one that's at the cat, or this tree here, actually, I had slept at that cat bed. That was basically like my little save point. I totally thought that these were like weed plants for a second. Maybe it's catnip.
Sleep for an hour.
Like, IRL? Oh, okay. Fair enough. So, like, oh, I guess that'd be between all the spots, too, I bet. Not probably all just at one time. Right? Maybe? Also, I feel like I went
Yeah,
the wrong way
it's
again.
an IRL HR.
Oof. So, yeah, I guess that would take a minute. But I mean, if I'm not busy... Oh, hey. Figured it out. If I'm not, like, live or whatnot,
No,
or maybe
at
if it's, like,
once.
afterwards... Oh, at once! Oh, bruh! Okay, so it's like, well, put on like a few YouTube videos or whatnot in the meantime. But it could be done.
LMAO.
But I wonder how the game finishes out though. Like if you still get to like roam around, or like if it's like you gotta like restart the story type of thing. It's like I feel like it could go either way with this game. It's like I kind of want to know, but at the same time I kind of don't. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's like for example, like The Last of Us. Like that game, I was hoping it'd be like free roam or whatnot when you're done with it. Nah. Once you were done with it, you were done with it. Every time you use the whole classes, a lot of cool stuff. But what's that buzzing sound now? Is that him? Wait, so if I set the camera at the right angle, it's like as if it has feedback. It had to be just the right angle though. That was weird. Alright, go up here. Was that the cat that made the sound? I don't know what that sound was. I haven't heard that one yet. That one's cat. The other one's like. I don't know if I've quite even heard my own cat make that sound.
Helicopter, helicopter.
Oh, that made me jump a little bit. Jumping through the pipes. Do a 360. I think this is Midtown. Midtown's the street out here now I think about it. Or is it Midway? I think it's Midway Street. That's what it made me think of. Again, we got all like the sound commands. If you do like exclamation point sound commands, I got like a bunch of ones you can like type in chat. This is different than sound alerts, but I also have sound alerts too. Feel free to mess around with those. They come in handy for the memes. Also, this frame drop real there for a second. What's going on here? We got cinema. Oh, and then that's right, Silent. I haven't even taken a dab since you've been here as Kisa. I know you'll appreciate it too. Freaking earlier today, I got a freaking electric nail. And oh my god, I did not know they made them as nectar collectors. Like, I thought they were only like the actual like nail that you put on a dab rig. But it's cool because there's like a rubber thing you can attach to like a bong in this. So you can make it like a freaking actual dab rig too. Like, it's only 40 bucks. Like, freaking, I was psyched about this. But yeah, I'm gonna take a dab at it real quick. Exclamation point 420. Just gotta do the preheat setting, get it actually heated up. System temperature, slow temp, medium temperature, or high temperature. It's nice. So we're in a subway. And that's above ground. Okay, so we were below the subway. Yeah. Alright, exclamation point 420. Cheers, bud. That's right, I forgot. B12 became self-aware.
Cheers.
Oh, let's go. Cheers, cheers, bud. Oh my friends, no rider. I still really want to re-edit that one so it's like the proper clip because it cuts it off too soon. It's like I can do better that job than that. I cheated and I just took that one off the internet instead of clipping myself. No OCD me gets triggered with that one. Woo. But I still need to figure out like another 420 emote. It's like I was thinking about it. It's like I kind of want to do like the like before I got high, like some part of that song, like I was like thinking about that, but at the same time, like there was excuse me, there was another song that came to mind. I'm trying to remember what it was now. I should have wrote it down or like put it in Discord or something, because like somewhere along the lines I thought of it. There's another stoner song. I think it was something by Dr. Dre. Nothing, but I think I was listening to it on the way home actually from work this morning. I think that's what it was. The thing is like still Dre. It was like the very end of that. Oh, what? Is that a Zerg? Is it a helicopter? That one's a helicopter. What is that? What is that? I freaking I love that. Is this gonna like zap me or something? Like, what is this? I know curiosity killed the cat, but like, I'm a cat, so I'm curious. Why, hello, good sir. May I assist you with your arrest there? They're gonna reboot him? Wait, what? They're gonna give him a swift kick in the ass? Give him a reboot? So, that's kind of confusing when you think about robots like that. How are they gonna like? Are they like? Does their programming not line up? I feel like they would actually know. Like, why is there the confusions? You know, I kind of want to take another dab. Actually, I'm gonna take another dab while walking because this is electric nail and I don't need your torch. I love this. Oh, I need to turn this off a high though. Hold up. Actually, I put it on a high. Let's do this low temperature. Okay, good to go. Walking around town, being a cat, smoking dabs. And wait for it. Exclamation point 420. Or exclamation point 420 alt.
Smoke weed every day.
Hey, let's go. Damn, for that being a low temp dab. Whew. Granted, though, I mean, I do have reclaim at the moment. My roommate took the good dab, but fair enough. So actually, I kind of like almost prefer smoking reclaim like on stream, just for the sole reason. Let's go. Excuse me. But yeah, like I like stream.
Asterisk LMAO.
Schmote. I feel like the text-to-speech even said it as schmote. It's kind of funny, like trying to figure out how to spell stuff to get the like text-to-speech to like say stuff like with accents. Like I can never figure it out myself though, because like honestly, I only knew of one other person that had text-to-speech besides myself, like all the time. That's it. I only know of one other person that's like all the time. But cause yeah, now I think about it, I don't think I've heard the text-to-speech in your stream, Kisa. But oh, I can knock this over too. Let's go, and it breaks. I did this. Excuse me. That was like, when was it? It was like 2 years ago, and that was like actually a buddy that actually came to the dispensary that I worked at, and like we figured out we were streamers like then. Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's see what I do when chat gets wild with it. Mute tab. And then no one hears it. Not even me. And then I forget about it, and then I realize I forget chat even exists. And I'm like, oh god, there's like 5 pages worth of chat. Because like for me, like I need the text to speech, or else like I'll just forget. But also too, like I was like actually talking to Wob actually about it. Like,
I know a few streamers with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I only know one others all the time. I don't know if he still does it. I haven't seen him stream in a while because it's like time zone difference. I was talking to Wob about it, and it's like that way it makes it more like I'm actually talking to you kind of thing. It's more in real time, like I hear you like talking or whatnot. And then the other last stream or whatnot, we figured out there's personality to it, so like everyone's voice talks a different speed. It's supposed to be a different pitch, but it changes how fast they talk. And some people, they were talking like they were drunk. And then some people were talking like they were real fast. It was really funny. Like, they sound like the freaking robot there. Or there. Freaking wherever it is. Freaking, I get confused between my scenes that are mirrored versus the ones that are not mirrored. Is there stuff I can knock over here? Completely random. I just had a random deja vu moment just now. There's a YouTube video I've seen. Oh, fucking. Oh, what's his face?
Yeah,
Connor,
I love that.
I think his face. There's a group of him and 2 other people that are usually like all YouTubing together. They usually go to Japan, do a bunch of Japanese stuff. I'm trying to remember what his actual YouTube name is, but there's an episode that they did. It was in a Japanese kitchen or whatnot. It was a small little thing like that, and just the angle this was in, I swear to God, they had like the same camera angle, and it's like, wait, was this the same place that it was modeled after here? Hold up, something looks too familiar to me about this exact scene right here. Like it's legit deja vu moment for me there. Like I'm gonna have to bring up YouTube, find what's his face. I think his name was Connor, if I remember right. But he's like a British guy that always goes to Europe, or not Europe, Japan all the time. And then like there's like two other buddies that he usually does videos with at the same time. It's like one of those YouTubers like almost everyone like has actually like seen their videos, basically. Like he's one of those YouTubers. Am I even in the right place? There's lights in here. There's a cat there waving at me. What's my goal? Need to find a way out of here. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so pictures of symbols in the back. Oh, wait, the back of what? I'm so confused. I think I'm just stoned. Actually, I think that's all it is. But I'm supposed to find a way out of here. But didn't I just walk in here? Bruh. This frickin' e-nail works so good. I'm just like thinking here like, what am I doing? And it's like, oh wait, I know why I'm having a hard time remembering. Oh man, that frickin' I swear that works better than the frickin' regular nectar collector did. Not to mention too, I've got a wild broken one that frickin' only gets like a quarter of a dab anyways. Okay, so I need to find a way out of here. Oh, so I just need to find Clementine, I bet. Which one of you is Clementine? I don't think that was it. You're Mo? Joe. Mojo, let's go. I had a strange feeling when I saw it was Mo. It's like, what's the second one gonna be? I know they're gonna be correlated. Oh, hey! I found another nap spot. So when he's purring, no vibration in the controller. Not with this one. Yeah, so that must be PlayStation 5 only then. Because there's not even a tiny tiny vibration or anything. And I feel like there should be vibration here. I definitely would have noticed that.
I need to get hubby one of those.
Freaking, for the Ringo Burr. To get one of the, yes, these. It was only $40. Yeah, no, that's the thing. It was the Luca Seahorse Pro. Like, if you know, actually, if I go to my second camera, that would probably actually work a little better. And tab over to where is it? Second camera. Bam. Haha. That might show a little bit better. See, because this camera will actually like focus up here. But it's like the Luca Seahorse Pro. But yeah, it's a freaking neat little thing though. Because like it's even got a little cap here, so that way you don't actually freaking singe yourself with it. But yeah, it just heats up the end of it, whatnot. That's a whole coil comes off. And then like this too, like it's super easy to clean because like the glass neck of it just comes literally right out of there. You can clean it, get the freaking reclaim them out of there, no problem. And there's like a little tool that you can like push through there and clean out the whole thing. It's freaking neat. And then yeah, it's like it's got like two different settings too. Like you can just straight hit it. I mean, you still want to heat it up for a second, but it's like good for like if you're doing like CBD or whatnot, stuff that's like gonna be like super thin or whatnot. I was like, freaking which camera you even look at there. But yeah, like when it's CBD or whatnot, you just do that real quick. So it's real low temperature or like regular dab or like sessions or whatnot. Like do it 3 times the preheats and then it stays on. It stays up at temperature or whatnot. Is that no face mask? It is. Except it's not really see, I was wondering when someone's gonna notice that. I think you're the first one to actually point it out and say something about it. But it's actually not a mask, it's metal. But no, this is, I think it's supposed to be like something that hangs up or whatnot. It scared the crap out of my roommate though, because I had it hanging up in the ceiling. And like it's just floating up there, so it's just at night or whatnot. And of course, yeah, you just see that at night. Yeah, no, it's a little startling. But then, like, I've just been having that there. It's like, maybe someone will notice if I move just right. And, like, and they're just like, I'm just sitting here one night, and just like, oh, hey, what's over there? And then they just see that, they're just like, what? But, yeah, no, that, it lives in the chair. If the cats are there, then it's there, so It works out. Also, we got a bang on exclamation point Pokecatch. I got that on my phone. I can just copy and paste it and caught. Yeah. You know what? Screw it. Let's get another dab. Because, like, I freaking love this. And, like, bruh, I got a lot of reclaim. So I am prepared. Because, like, freaking this whole thing is just full of reclaim. So, I mean.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
Fuck!
Cheers, man. Every time I hear that, though, every time, like, it throws me off when I do, or hear the, like, the hidden
that.
one. The freaking, well, if you do also exclamation point Poke check, to, like, check it, or see if you have the Pokemon for that. I've got it so it's, like, the original one.
Big on
and
escape.
because, like, I put both of
No
those
one
in
caught
there,
it.
my brain can't process which one is going to play first. But I think, like, the one that's from the show is higher quality versus the low quality one's, like, the meme one.
What's the white thing?
The white thing. No face? Is that what you're talking about? And then the dragons that silly since the time. I can't
No.
remember, to be honest. I can't remember. Which one thing? Oh, if you're talking about this, my actual cart. I was like looking, like what else is white, and I realized the little tip for the cart was in there. The freaking that's the other thing too. My freaking battery to my cart is the size of my cart, and like it works the same.
You
No
were
problem.
just holding it with the nectar collector.
This thing? Oh, this thing! So this is like a little silicone that my freaking actual nectar collector is in, but it's like stuck into it. There we go. Figured I'd actually get it out of there. That's actually what I usually would hold the nectar collector in, though. But the top of it, though, is where the actual reclaim is, like in the little containers. So yeah, that's what I actually hold the reclaim in there for that. The actual Dabos, this is like a little Simpsons jar. It's actually kind of cool. Like if I actually have it here or whatnot, I'll have to remember to actually like show it on screen or whatnot, because I never actually like hold it up or whatnot when I do have it here. Yeah, I'll have to show it off or whatnot. But you know, there's a part of me that just
It's
thought, like,
full metal.
my cat's asleep. If we could like figure out something, if I open another game, I'd have to try to open up on top of that stream, go burr then for sure. It's like, wait, we could figure out something on
Willow Grove
YouTube,
Girl,
or
Full
we just
Metal
be like
Alchemist.
full like stoner mode for like an hour, get that achievement, because the cat is technically asleep. Like I thought about that, is like, wait a minute, hold up. I mean, we are quite literally just sitting there. But otherwise, Full Metal Alchemist. I see where you guys are going with that. I'm gonna take another dab real quick, because, you know, I'm freaking loving this thing now. But, like, you know, now I think about it, I guess I'd see the achievement pop up, but I should have timed it.
At
'Cause, I mean,
Silent
we've been sitting here a
Chariot, you
minute,
just
but only
looked
like
it
a
up.
minute,
The
though.
7 Deadly Sins dragon looks way different, lol.
Oh, I guess I could look it up, though.
Can you play
Oh,
a
okay.
game over it?
Or there could be like Stream Raiders I could do. If it's Steam, no. Actually, it would have to be. Excuse me. Like if it was Epic or something like that, or something that's not through Steam at all. Because being that there is a game running through Steam, it won't let me open another game. Which, to be fair, the computer thanks me for that. Because like. Especially in streaming, I mean, it's already at its max. Like, as it is, I'm wanting to get an actual green screen so I can stop using video broadcast, save like literally 20% my CPU usage, or no, not my GPU usage, because I figured out like my GPU, 80% of it when I don't even have a game open, just with NVIDIA broadcast and OBS by itself. So yeah, I need to tone it down just a little bit, just a little if I can. Excuse me. But you know what? Let's actually. I do kind of want to actually look this up though, real quick. I can move a tab over this screen though, because I didn't set up an actual scene for Stray, so I kind of cheated and just did a screen capture on one of my other ones. But otherwise, no Alchemist. I'm kind of curious though if it's the if it is that actually. You know what?
Also at Willow Grove girl love
Hold
the
up.
name XD funny. I live near a place called Willow Grove.
That's what, you know, that's actually, it's funny that you say that because I actually used to live by a place that was called Willow Grove, too, actually, back when I was on the West Coast. Figured all the, like, when I moved out here, though, I realized there are so many places that are, like, the same names, like, fucking, what is it, there's Milwaukee out here, and there's a Milwaukee in Oregon. There's a bunch more, but I can't think of it. But there is a bunch more. There's a whole like the freaking town names and city names. I realize are not as original as I thought they were.
I'm in the East Coast.
You're in the East Coast. See, like I was on the West Coast. I'm in the Midwest now, so it's like we freaking got all three areas. I'm sure there's probably a Willow. No, it was Willow Street that was in the West Coast. That's what it was, not Willow Grove. No, maybe there was Willow Grove too. Might have been both. Or, I don't know. Either way, like, street names and towns or whatnot. I'm surprised how common they are. But yeah, on a side note, though, like, so you see that.
Someone before
you see
asked
that.
if my name was
That
based
is
off
actually pretty
that,
close,
but
though.
I've just loved Willows since watching Pocahontas as a kid.
Fair enough.
At Kissarin Moon High.
So yeah, so I'd say Silent is actually right on that. I actually wasn't 100% sure. Because that's my roommates, and I haven't seen Full Metal Alchemist yet. A lot of people told me to check it out. A lot of
Hi
people
at
showed me the
Silent
intro.
Chariot.
So like there is all that too. I do need to actually get on that too because I heard the music too. The music's freaking epic for it. Oh man, if only I knew how long I've been sitting here. Because I know I haven't really been sitting here that long. I don't think I can draw this out for an hour, to be fully honest. So. Wake up, kitty! I want to meow at you.
Watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Oh, the Brotherhood. I think that was the one. I think because it was like, wasn't that the newer one? I forget. I know it was like a year ago. I remember like there was like 4 or 5 people that were like all talking about it all at once.
Have
They're like,
you
have
watched
to see it.
Digistication?
Yeah, I can't say I have myself. I mean, I'm always open for like ideas or whatnot. Like even in Discord, I've got like a channel for like animes to watch. So like it's kind of like a little list or whatnot. Like I need to like get back my streaming sites or whatnot for those. But like, no, you can kind of get a list like kind of ideas ones to watch. Freaking Chainsaw Man though. Chainsaw Man. Oh.
Brotherhood follows the manga better.
I
and
haven't
has a
seen the
different
last
ending than
episode,
FMA.
but like I started watching that, and yeah, no, I got addicted to that. I'm trying to wake up, also, by the way.
Happy
Is being
Face
A not the right
Brotherhood
button?
is the best.
Do I need to click on the game? Wow. I forgot to click on the game, but I can meow though. Well, I'm still asleep.
LMAO.
I am a genius, professional streamer.
Good job.
Thank you. I do my best. See, like, okay, so when the cats like are like laying on me and they do that, or at least my freaking asshole of a cat, Toki. Wow, I said Togo. Toki. Freaking, he will use my leg as a scratching post. I know he's just stretching, but like he just stretches and he's like, oh wait a minute, these jeans though
Ouch.
just yeah, no, he freaking, oh, at least thank God he is like the size of both my hands. He's not the size of one palm of my hand anymore, but he's the size 2 now though, give or take. I mean, if I can hold him still, maybe a little bit bigger. No, you know what? I kind of want to go find him, but I kind of don't want to just like sit here in this though. So we also don't have like, see if I was like playing a YouTube video, then I'd like have that going.
Emotional damage!
Freaking scared me and the cat. I wasn't quite fully prepared to jump, but I jumped and pressed A. So here I am. Whap! Usually that one doesn't make me jump though. It's usually the horn that makes me jump. Can I go this way? You know, I never did see what happens if I walk in the wall. Do I just stop moving? Am I gonna regret that? Hold up, it doesn't sound... I don't know about this suddenly. No, you know what, I'm not gonna do it. Because after all, I've like, what, died 7 times? If it's true that you only have 9 lives, I want to be careful here. Because I haven't exactly been a lucky cat. I, once again, forgot what I was supposed to do because I took a hell of a long nap, but not long enough at the same time, though. You'd find a way out of here. Gotta get out of this place. Isn't that a song by like Rolling Stones or something like that? Or something like that? It's something along those lines. It's like one of those songs I kind of remember it, but not quite. What do we got here? Can I jump up there? Oh, wait, hold up. Hold up. I can... Well, I had the camera just right to where it's actually close. There we go. That's all I wanted. Whenever I can get the camera up close, I go for it. Because, like, there's no way to, like, zoom in on the cat this way. Like, it's just... Yeah. Wait, hold. There we go. Okay, so maybe I have to get, like, against a wall or something like that. But I usually, like, maybe I was just super stoned last time. That's probably what it was. And it's like, how I can't zoom in on the face. I want to zoom in on the face and meow, damn it.
Meow.
Meow, I'm gonna meow the fuck out of you.
You get more than 9, but you get an achievement.
That's when I need that sound command. That freaking sound alert. You can get more than 9, but you get achievement if you with 9. Oh, hey, okay, so we're going for the achievement then. So we're just gonna pretend that I actually only have 9 lives. Because, wait, hold up, what do you say? Should try building my own version of you. Who's saying that? Bruh. You don't... I'd rather have an actual cat. Then again, I had a robot dog as a kid, so then again, it did flips. It was a very 90s thing. When I thought about that, I was like, wait a minute, hold up though, on a real note. I was gonna say, the orange things get my attention in this game, but
I found
that
out
one
because
was
I
really
died
orange,
more
so.
than 9 times.
Oh, yeah, the
I
robo
think
dog.
I had the
It,
same
had, like,
robo dog.
It had like a little remote on it. It was like it freaking like it had the freaking little eyes or whatnot, but it was like a solid. Oh wait, can I do this? Hold it. It was like a solid one, so it was like that basically instead of being like separate eyes. I haven't done that before, like connecting like that, then doing that. Because I've always just done like that instead of together, if that makes sense. Did I just do something new for the first time? Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, you know, like freaking those things. But then again, like when I was really, really little though, oh, I thought I just fucked up and just like tripped. Like I saw the corner of my eye, I just saw tail. But freaking my cat would just be the one to do that, just step up on a ledge and just freaking go straight down. I can see that happening too easy. Now I'm gonna... Oh wait, hold up. This one not gonna like...
I really want you
floating.
to play Horizon soon.
I'd be curious about that game. I being how big the game was, the download, I almost just have a strange feeling the computer's gonna like sweat real hard playing it off stream. But then again, this game runs fairly smoothly for pretty much being high graphics. I mean, I turned the resolution scaling down to 80%, so that way everything else is still up high, but the main breather parts like turned down a little bit, and I mean you can't really tell, to be honest. I mean the only thing you maybe could tell is like when you're really up close, like when I try to get those meow shots, like yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
A wild cuber appears catch it
Oh, a
using
cubeb.
poke
Hold
catch.
up.
Winners revealed in 90s.
Right, where am I supposed to go? Supposed to get out of here. Or I'm supposed to go up. I hear water. I see stairs. Orange light. It's a good sign. I think I just talked to you. Okay, I know I talked to you.
Who's that Pokemon?
At Willow Grove Girl, Cubone registered in
It's
Pokédex.
Pikachu! It was like one of those moments like I was trying to think about it. It's like, is it? Me. Oh wait, that's right. No, that's right. I got this on my phone. All I gotta do is hold down, hit paste, good to go. Don't even need to tab out. I gotta remember that. I set this up ahead of time. Turn on some jams.
Have you heard the Cubone / Kangaskhan theory?
I don't. The Kangaskhan? The Kangaskhan theory?
Horizon Zero Dawn
Freaking bro, what?
or Forbidden West. Also can't hear. I have 6 ads.
Oh, Brett. It was. I put it in Discord. To be honest, I don't remember. It was the first one. The first one. The
Zero
one
Dawn
released first. I'm gonna say yes. Something like that.
Cubone escaped. No one
Oh,
caught
bruh.
it.
Oh, wait, no, I did try to catch it. Oh, bruh, it didn't work though. Bruh.
I played
Well, I'm
Zero
curious
Dawn.
about this.
It
Oh,
was
wait,
so
hold
fun.
up. I see what I'm supposed to do. So I haven't played any of them yet. Silent, though, I think you're trying to go for 100%, or you just got 100%? I know last time I was streaming you were working on that. Oh, I can jump up down there. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. You just stand on here. Can I... Wait, hold up. I thought that was a thing there. Alright. I can be Destructo Cat. Oh, hold up. I gotta meow at this other one, though. Oh, wait. No,
At
maybe not.
Kissarinmun, I'm currently on
Maybe
my
you should go this
second
way.
playthrough of Forbidden West.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Yeah, because like, you get to keep all the stuff when you finish or whatnot.
I'm still working on 100%.
Trying to get, like, that mega 100%. Well, you're still working on it, though. Damn, you only had, like, the 2 things left? Or something like that? Like, I mean, it sounds like it's one of those ones, like, it would take a long time to get to the end of it. Real long time. I don't think I've been through here yet. Maybe? What's in here? Wait, my tail went up for a second. Why'd that go up? Wait, scratch this, though. It's scratch, scratch, and scratch, scratch, scratch. Cat, and I'm kitty cat. And the dance, 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 and the dance, dance, dance.
I have to wait for Forbidden West to come to Steam. I hate PlayStation exclusives. No,
Oh, the second one.
you're thinking
yeah.
of when I was preparing for
I
my
got you.
second playthrough.
Oh, wait. So now you're on the second playthrough. Okay, I got you. I got you. Right? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, because that's what you just said. Gotcha. I'm up to speed now. Nah, I'm up to speed there. But you know, like I feel that though, because like Gran Turismo, for example, like if I play that on computer mods, then I would be set. But like now, it has to be on PlayStation. Then they have to go and freaking ruin Gran Turismo 7, the economics in there. Then like now, like to get a $4 million car in there, like you gotta like actually freaking like buy it because you won't earn the money in game. And yeah, oh, you don't have a PlayStation. That makes it harder too. Yeah, that does kind of cause a roadblock. It's freaking I don't even got a PlayStation 5. I still got the PlayStation 4. And it's the first generation PlayStation 4, and I like to say it's got a tumor because it's got a shell for like the bigger like 1 terabyte hard drive because it's
Lucky
500 gigabyte,
LOL.
but it doesn't have the bigger terabyte hard drive in there yet, so it's just got the shell on there, so it's just got a tumor basically.
I had to wait a long time.
But it's actually not even plugged
and
in right
got
though. I need to
lucky.
get it hooked up. I haven't even hooked it up here actually at all in this new place. Because, like, what was it? For the first 2 weeks or a month or something like that, there was, like, no internet here at all. It was a struggle to even get internet here at all. And then finally they showed up. And then I just kind of got used to just not having it plugged in. And either way, I play on the computer more often anyways, because, like, I kind of got tired of a lot of the PlayStation games I had. Except some of them. I mean, I kind of want to check out Gran Turismo again, see if maybe they fix that. See what other PlayStation exclusives they have too, because when I had no internet, they also took freaking yearly $60 from me. That I was not anticipating. But either way, that's taken care of. I definitely was here at the very beginning. Okay, so I made a complete loop. I am definitely lost. What's it say? Is one of these out of here? Residency, Shop Street, Nico Corp. I still don't know if I ever found Clementine. Like, I don't know if it's gonna be like a random person or whatnot in here. If anyone wants to give me like just a little hint or push in the right direction as which direction to go, it would be appreciated right now because I actually am a little clueless. I am not going to lie. Oh hey, I can go up here.
At Kissarillo,
I don't know if this
follow
means anything at all, though.
Whiter on Twitter. Keeps tracks of when the PS5 is shipped to places like Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart.
See, like for me, like half it was like the price too, because I know it got a little bit more expensive, but I don't know if it came down in price too, though. Nowadays, I mean, granted, Black Friday is a thing, but
weren't you with Clementine at the beginning of the stream?
Wait, was that who it was?
Something I could look into for hubby.
Wait, is Clementine the one that's like hooked up to all the computers? Wasn't that who I was originally talking? Wait, isn't that who told me to go find someone? Oh, I need to find a way out of here, but everyone else seemed. Oh wait, no, because I went through. Never mind, I am behind the stage. No, because I went to the Midtown, and now I'm trying to find a way out of here. Wait, what? No, yeah, no, this. I'm supposed to find someone named Clementine. She could help us. I gotta find her. I don't think it's someone I met yet. It says this picture and the symbols in the back could probably help us somehow, but on the back of what? Like,
no, she's somewhere here.
She's somewhere here? Oh, okay, so like I just gotta like, okay. So I just gotta
didn't meet her yet.
Got you. I didn't know I could like trip someone.
The back of the photo.
Back of the photo. I forgot. Oh! I have an inventory. I knew it was because I was stoned. Okay. I'm gonna remember that as no Christmas colors. Maybe. Unless it's upside down. It looks like it says no and then just Christmas dots. I think the neighbors have a motorcycle, apparently? This is news to me. I know that sound came up in the mic. I saw that pop up, but I guess that's a thing. Alright. I'm okay with that. I like had to hear that. It's like, is that in game? Are there motorcycles in this now too? What? Huh? What? Who? If I can see it. I've never seen this. This is the first I've heard of this. Literally. Did you guys hear that? It sounded like it was literally right on the other side of the window. Are you Clementine? I doubt that. You girl, they yada. I gotta look for that sign. Maybe it's gonna be on someone. Maybe it's gonna be on a wall. Detective on here.
You can ask someone / anyone on the street what it means.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forget how this game works. Show item. That's right. Thank you. Like I said, very appreciated. Is that an address on the back? First symbol's a street. Then there's a floor and a door number.
All good.
Oh my god. You were a lifesaver. Yes, because I am just like stoned, just like... Picture! Hello. Hello. Hi. You're a person? No, you're a robot. Hi. I'm a cat. Should be pretty easy to find. Alright, so, wait. Street. Floor. Door. Yes. Right? Yes. I'm gonna go with it. So, no. The street is a no. Wait. Signs. Where's the signs?
I haven't played this in a while, but I remember bits.
It was like I forget. It's been out for a while too.
I think this is the first game you've played that I've also played.
Oh, okay. Because it seems like okay. So I haven't like. I mean, I guess besides Fall Guys. Well, like then again, I've played Fall Guys like way back when it first came out on PlayStation. That was free on there. Oh, you only played this recently? Oh, okay. See, that didn't quite help me out because I was looking for like... Unless like maybe it is upside down. I'm looking for like the little no thing that I found on there. I mean like... Can I... Okay, I can't like rotate it like I was thinking more so maybe that is right side up. Does not help me. I almost thought I saw it like in the red thing. So like, the first one was the street, and then it was like the...
A viewer bought the game for me when it first came out.
Well, let's go. Hell yeah. In a sense, that's kind of like, I guess, how it is in this case for me, because like I'm actually game sharing off my old roommate. So like, yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, I didn't have to pay it for it, but like I was about to buy it, and then like I saw this like friend of yours that also like plays this, and I saw this like, wait, hold up, I don't need to buy this. Wait, what? I can't. Hey, buddy, old pal, friendo, friendo. But as it is, like, I mean, he already has me like play games of his anyways, like as redeems. So
I game share with my
out.
best friend.
Hey, it all works. Cassette tape. Side quest? Oh, hey, I already took one off your back. You're welcome. Yeah, that one's already gone. I already fucked up that one. So that one's I can jump on that. Where's the other one though? Oh yeah, see there it is right there. Literally ran it over. The little footpaths. Right, how do I get up here? And yeah,
What are you? No! Oh, it's gonna be fun. We can
It's
stay
gonna
up
be
late,
fun.
swapping manly stories, and in the morning, I'm making waffles.
waffles.
Oh!
It's basically like freaking. I feel like the spirit of this cat, like causing like the mayhem. Donkey. They didn't notice that. If you sit on here, he actually notices when you meow at him. Alright, so there's supposed to be a third one, or did I already?
Yeah, I
Wait, no,
forgot
there's
the
one I
next
already took
couple
out.
lines, but then it goes.
Secret tunnel! Secret tunnel! Through the mountains! Secret tunnel! Yeah! It just dawned me though. It just dawned me though. I think that was actually all three of those. I can't jump down from here, can I? Because there was another one that I took out before I realized that. I remember taking out that other one specifically more recently. I don't think I can jump down from there actually. There were spikes on the other thing. So that actually might be done. I think I only had to take out that one. Oh, that was a close one though. I haven't seen him almost freaking fall off there yet. Can I, there we go. I was gonna say, I know my cat would do that. My cat's also fallen off the freaking ledge because there was a freaking tapestry that was stripped, or hung over there. And my cat freaking was like laying down there as in living and she and like she was completely fine, but it's just I see her just like land and just she freaking just run. Also, is it just me, or is that weirdly look? I was gonna say, is it just me, or does that weirdly look like the TikTok symbol? But like, slightly different. I feel like that's just almost a little too close there. Is that just me?
It does.
I feel like it kind of resembled that a little bit. Let's see it. Okay, I think these are the guys I was talking to. Okay, I did get all three. Take my prize.
A wild lullaby appears catch it using
Outmix.
podcast winners revealed in 90s.
So is this like these like
agree.
jams I can like play on here now? I'm curious about this. Examine. And show to B12. Saves on my graphics card. Can't stop screaming. I feel it. I feel it. Should play some loud music. All right, how do I play that? Oh, I gotta put it in a radio. Oh, B12 doesn't have a radio player, does he? Sad day. I feel like B12 should just be like just bopping around, just being a little cat, just walking around, just having some dubstep playing. No big issue. Alright, so I took out those cameras. That was a little side quest for that.
I wonder how many people playing this didn't know what a cassette tape was.
Oh, the sad thing, you're probably right. Like freaking, like, I had to think about that. So many people don't even know what a cassette tape is
LOL,
anymore.
true.
Like, bruh, like, oh, the freaking age gap. Like, oh my god. Like, sometimes I just have moments like that. It just hits me. Like, I don't even have to. I literally can't even. But also, box. I am in box. I'm also clicked out of the game. I am in box now.
Lullaby escaped.
I love
No
that so
one caught
much. Volby escaped. Rip. You know what? I'm gonna find my cat, damn it. I'll be right back to Toki. Or Manny. Or Mr. Cat, whichever one I find first. Preferably Toki, because Toki's the small one, and I totally have my freaking board wrapped around. Wheel. There we go. Alright, now casually disappear into the depths of the stream, so bye. Toki is. I think Toki is in my room, but I got Mr. Cat. All the cats are like asleep though. Maddie was out in the living room too, but Mr. Cat, he usually doesn't go anywhere. He's usually a little bit more chill.
Kitty.
Get all this right here. Here's one of them.
Kitty.
Got 3 of them here. Get tabbed over. I got the second screen. And I get comfy. Yeah, this is Mr. Cat. He's a little sleepy though. I think he's a little grumpy because of it. But usually though, Togi, he'll actually come like lay over here, and there's like a little light too. It's like his little grow light.
I have 2 cats.
Place it above him, and then make him grow big and strong.
OMG, so cute.
But yeah, freaking
Speedy,
they're
what's
all a
your name
handful,
for
though.
the cat in game?
You know, I was actually thinking about that earlier. Like, ironically, I was silently thinking about it, and then silently someone asked. No, like I actually was thinking about that, and it's like I don't think the game has like really given the cat a name per se. I mean, B12 obviously is in there, but I don't think the cat's been stated as having an official name. So I'm assuming that's up to me. That is the wrong stream, or the wrong scene. That is the right scene. But you know, I feel like we'd have to name that as a community though. Like, I feel like we'd all have to, like, vote on that. I'm not sure, though. Like, what would fit this cat? Because, I mean, B12's name is the robot, not the cat.
Yes. I
Yes.
named mine Ginger.
I'm thinking, I have a strange feeling me and Silent are on the same page right now. Just the name, yes. Named yours Ginger. They're like, I mean, he's like a slim, kind of Garfield-looking cat, though. I don't know. And I don't think it's specified if it's a boy or girl either, too. I also still am completely lost. I think I'm supposed to, like, literally... Oh, wait, hold up. I recognize
It's
that
not.
symbol on the wall. Symbol on the wall, that looks familiar. Hold up. Wait, but I was already up here. Oh, wait, but then there's... Okay, now I need to actually look at the picture. I'm onto something, though. It's not... Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what I thought. It's like, do I
You
call the cat
are.
it? I am? Ringo Burr. Wait, what? I forgot already. Let's see. So 3 green dots in a triangle, and then 5 of the red dots. That's what I need to look for. So 3 and then 5. Okay, so that's close.
You are on to something.
I did not see this here. But I figured out that, oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, I figured out, though, because, like,
Tada.
I talked to someone and said it was the, I know it's ta-da, but the friggin' text me tada, huh? But, I thought this would not quite be the right one, though, because I thought it'd be, like, the next
XD.
one. Because this thing's like, nah, it's gotta be the next door, it's not the same. I was like one off, so I gotta trash this place. But it might be in here. But I'm assuming this is it, though. Because, yeah, this gotta be it. I never noticed that there's a little, like, small window I can jump into, though. Oh. Are you Clementine? You're Clementine! You were a sent. Never mind, who are you? Who are you people? What do you want? Actually, that's another sound command I feel like I need to add at some point. Like freaking Patrick doing that, like when he looks underneath the rock. Who are you people? Oh, I thought it was a cutscene. What am I doing? Answer me! Meow? Wait, what are you doing in my house? It made me jump a little bit because I thought that was like because I meowed and I thought he did something. I was like, oh. Oh wait, the picture, dirt. I would just love just imagining this though. Just a cat just jumps in my room. What are you doing in my house? Answer me. Cat, what are you doing in my house? Freaking. I then imagine just the cat just be like, I have this picture for you. I have this picture for you. Let me show you the picture though. Show item. Okay. I know how to work this game. Show item. So Gibraltar's finally decided to send someone. I guess you're cute. Sound commands are so loud today. Is that just me? Maybe my headset's turned up. Like everything is making me jump. Like literally everything. The game was loud earlier. Oh, you know, I think my headset's turned up. It's all the way up. You know what? I mean, I got everything mixed up. You know what? Fuck it. We'll leave it. Yeah, I need to just anticipate this a little bit, maybe. I can hear everything clear as day, so I mean, at least I'm not going like, huh? As long as I'm not like too loud for the neighbors, or like over the top or so. It's like back before I moved, I could be because like there were no neighbors, but now I gotta think about that. That was an unsettling camera angle. I think that was just ironically where I was, but I just quite literally just had him just teabag me. I'm pretty sure. And it wasn't the cat, it was me personally just now, because he just did that to the camera. Like, bruh. What is in here? I feel like there's stuff glowing in here. Maybe that's just a reflection. No. Thought there's stuff I could do in there. A little bit teleportation there. Let's see what I can mess with. Oh, hey, here you go. I knew there's something. Oh. Is this a nap spot? No. Can be.
Winter is coming.
This cat just looking around. Freaking,
We can't face
you just hear Game of Thrones going. Wait, hold up. This is actually a nap spot, is it? No, I can't sleep here. I thought for sure I'd be able to sleep right here. Freaking got the salt lick, because, like, cats love those.
Clip
But I've heard that they're bad for that, though. Right? I feel like that was, like, perfect. Oh, hey, here I was right. See if I can't get a minute 20. If someone gets it, appreciate you. Otherwise, oh, not minute 20, hour 20 in. I'll have to remember that.
1 hour 20 minutes and 35 seconds.
That's good. I was like zooming out in these spots too, and always giving me a chance to take a dab too. But like then I can like can't get like the cinematic part. It's like, I mean, if I'm like playing through it, I probably wouldn't sit here as long. I'd probably just casually look through it. But you know, like, I mean, stream, we gotta be cinematic. Meantime, exclamation point 420 or exclamation point 420 all. Just gotta wait for this to heat up.
Smoke weed every day.
Let's go. Cheers, man. Yeah, Christmas freaking came early for me with this thing. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did. Because like one of my buddies like actually had one of these, like he actually showed me it last night. And it was like, bruh, like this is freaking awesome, because like I didn't know they came in nectar collectors, like I said before. Like I thought it was only like a bucket or like an actual like e-nail type of thing. Like bruh. I love all seeing all the smoke modes too. But like, yeah, I love that thing. And then, like I said too, like it's just a regular Pro. It's not like the Pro Plus. The Pro Plus seemed like it was like the same thing. I'm sad though the controller doesn't vibrate for that though. I still want to find Toki though, because Toki's the small one. Oh, and I thought that was Toki, but no, that was Toki's toy. That is literally the size of Toki. Because I got like a dog toy actually. It's like one of those crinkly ones. Because he loves playing with like grocery bags. So, I mean, it was, the thought of it is like, oh, it's perfect. It's like a little actual toy thing. But, it's crinkly like a bag would be. I feel like there is something about this. Also, I'm weirdly glowing, like, very bright. I don't know what to call this kitty. Meow, I know. I just want to go through the door. It exists, so I want to go through it. Even though I can clearly go around it, I still need to go through that damn door. I am a cat. I need through this door, right here. This one, exactly. It goes outside, I know it does. You there! Let me outside! You've been planning to use the subway for a while now? It doesn't go outside? You even have the keys to start it. Was I supposed to talk to you this whole time? You need an atomic battery to power it. I feel like I was actually supposed to talk to you. Nuclear Corporation has secured its factory. The entire tax, these railroad, bomberjack, and gold chain. Take this message to him. I was definitely supposed to talk to you. Ollie? Nolly Ollie? Nolly Ollie. I'm gonna go with Nolly Ollie. I'm supposed to go up to this guy and be like, Nolly Ollie! And run away. I'm sticking to it. Nolly Ollie, 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 Ollie. Who am I supposed to talk to?
Okay,
what are you exactly?
I may hop off. Have a good
cat.
rest of your stream.
Alright, sounds good. Appreciate you seeing me in here. Hope you have a good one. In the meantime, I am going to continue to be lost. And find stuff here? Okay, I thought I'd scratch this. Yeah, hope you have a good one.
See you next time-y.
Sounds good. I found more boxes. Is there an achievement for going to like all the boxes? Because like there's more than one box. There'd just be a cat running back and forth between them.
Catch it using
Exclamation point,
winners
Bogesh.
revealed in 90s.
It's Pikachu! Meow. Okay, but let's see, where am I actually supposed to head to? That's right, so I need to use the robot wearing a bomber jacket with a gold chain. He was
More
over by
Gen
the
1
other
Pokemon
thing.
today.
Right? I've been kind of noticing that. I mean, I'm totally okay with it. Those are the ones I'm familiar with. But I need to go to where those signs were that are directing me to different areas. I think down this way. Maybe? I know there's a sign I saw somewhere pointing me off in a direction. I don't think I'm supposed to go in this way. Do you have a problem with me? Oh, it's being restocked. Okay. Good day. Who is wearing a gold chain and a bomber jacket? I feel like I can imagine who it is, but I don't know where they are. I don't think it's a police officer. I'm trying to figure out where the directional signs were, the two. Somewhere around here, pointing off from the shop that it's supposed to go
Chansey
to.
has been caught by SpeedyFireEagle.
Oh, you didn't trip all the way last time. Bruh. Can I... This one probably hates me. If only I could like jump on the ledge and like jump onto him or something like that. Okay, I thought that was great. I've never tripped him before. Cat can't get in the club even.
Trying to kill more robots.
Trying to kill more robots. Right, this cat is just feeding for more. Wait, hold up, you're wearing a bomber jacket. You're wearing a gold chain though. No. Yeah, that's not a bomber jacket, that's just a jacket.
I wonder what music they listen to at the club.
Right? Oh hey, this is the sign I was looking for. Eco Corporation, so I'm supposed to go in this way? You there! Oh hey, you are the guy. That was actually a pure guess. That is definitely a bomber jacket and a gold chain, 100%. And yes, I am with the outside, I mean the contact. Not the outside, it's definitely from the inside. Players restricted, here guarded. You check every person who enters, turns away anyone who's not a worker. Huh. Jacket, worker helmet. Alright. I just gotta give him a jacket and a helmet. That's totally gonna be easy as a cat. I got you.
Smoke weed every day.
Hey. Cheers, bud. No torch needed. Ringo Burr for a minute there is like, I don't have my torch. Where did I put it? No, I don't need it because I got this. I like this. Quite indubitably so. Alright. Cheers, bud. Looking at it, I don't know if you can actually see the smoke going through it. You can see the smoke going through the center part here, but I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Yeah, you can kind of. I actually did take another dab just to look. The tip of this was white when I got it. It's already black. But it's nice, it has a quartz tip too. So it's gonna last a long time. But the tips are all replaceable too. Full face, just stay idle, I start laying down, let's go. That's actually what I wanted to do. But it's just thinking there's no button to lay down. Meow. You there, may I have your clothes? I gave you a cassette tape. Nope. Oh, I can go under this? This vehicle makes me think of the freaking pigeon from BeamNG Drive, just because it's only got 3 wheels. You there! I've actually already talked to you. Wait, you like my outfit? It's important for security. I do like it. You got it from the clothes shop and the hat shop. You don't have yours in my size. I don't need my size. The clothes shop and the hat shop. I mean, I guess that kind of just makes sense. But where? Oh, hey, shop to the right. Am I purring? Oh, hey, clothes. Oh, hey, worker vest. I would like to buy a worker vest, please. Hello? Meow. I am going to scratch your freaking scratching rug bell. Hello? You there? Can I buy clothes from you? You one of those young punks listening to loud music all day? No, because I can't freaking find a radio player for my cassette tape. Cassette plate, wow. Don't touch anything, don't make any noise, don't ask for credit. I'm gonna just sit here and meow at you then. It says don't touch anything, but I feel like I'm supposed to touch something. I didn't know I could jump up here actually. Why was that a jump scare? I need to turn down some of these because it was so quiet and then that's so loud. Oh my god. That is actually over the top loud. Actually looking at it, that maxed out my audio actually. Why is everything just louder today? Like what the fuck? Is there like a gain that's put on this or something? Yeah, it's not even just my headset, like bruh. Yeah, I might turn this down just a tiny bit. Maybe just a little bit. Little bit. Dear Lord. Oh, I was
Count
not
how
ready.
many times you've jumped this stream.
This is probably good already like 4 times I'm thinking. Already guess. I feel like it feels like it's been like 4 times just from sound commands that weren't even supposed to be jump scares. They're just sound commands. Freaking smoke weed every day. Ah! Oh hey, cassette tape. I can play my loud music all day. It was dubstep. I was right. It was definitely loud though. It's that little boom. It's like, why that note? It's just really louder than the rest of the music. Okay, I don't know how I'm supposed to actually buy the jacket. Oh, steel jacket, of course. Didn't think about that. Oh hey! What's up, bud? How you doing? Long time no see. This would be a shame if it was currently fall because it's November.
Get fucked!
Oh man, then that would be the time for the thug life walking away. Years go back. Oh hey. Oh. You're restocking hats. It's like as if you have a little box there. Is he gonna like do anything, or do I have to take it from inside? I have to take it from inside. Don't mind. Oh, wait, it's being restocked. Well then hurry the fuck up. Wait for ages, just stoop latchy to get back. The bar. Okay, I gotta go to the bar. Side quest. Is this the bar? This looks like a bar. This is food bar. What? I'm not the chef. Hold what? Wait, what can I do over here? Translate? Dry air and bowl of hot oil, extra quality. Bruh, what? I guess that makes sense. I thought I could like fuck with the hologram. Wait, can I? Let's see. Where would the bar be? Over here. If I were to just guess, I'd say this is where the bar would be. See, that's the club. I think that was a house. I don't think the bar is down here. I think the bar is over here. I think the bar is directly next to that, actually. Oh, maybe this is the bar. I was gonna say, there's gotta be another way in there, I bet. I am so jumpy for no reason. I did have an energy drink at work this morning. That could be why. So it's only 4:30? Wait, hold up. Damn, it's only 4:30 here. It's already like nighttime. What the fuck? It's only 4:30 and it's dark out here. Wait, hold up. 4:27. Oh, shit, I missed about 7 minutes. Exclamation point 4:20. I mean, I probably did just take a dab actually then. Or was that when you did 7:10 in the 4:20? Hold up. I'm just now putting all that together. That was 8 minutes ago. That was, I see, now that was at 4:20. I just now put two together. I did smoke at 4:20. Okay. Well, now that I put two and two together, I'm gonna smoke.
You didn't miss it.
Let's go. It took me a minute to put two and two together, and I realized because you did the 7:10, it's recorded, so it's exactly 8 minutes ago. And then I see it's 4:28, so ha! Thug life. I see now. I get it now. I'm putting it all together. I am just, wow, I was so, I thought it was all getting related to the game. Cheers, bud.
Speedy, my man.
Invention too. Oh wow, yo, what's up? I got a freaking email too. No torch needed for this week. I've been taking dabs left and right and super fashion. I barely smoked any oil too.
The
And I've taken like
710
so many
didn't show up
dabs.
for me, so I did the 420.
Oh, sometimes it'll do that in mobile. I don't know why it does that. Now that happened to me in other streams. Sometimes the channel points won't come up. That's usually I'll have to like hard close like the whole app. Like I'll close the stream, wait for it to do like the little second like mini window thing, close that. Like make sure Twitch is like fully shut down, reopen it, and then usually works. Sometimes like a connection to chat sometimes. But yeah, no, that'll happen to me at times too. I don't think it happens in desktop as often. I think it's just a mobile thing. But out loud, how you do it? How's the weather over there? Freaking cold as shit over here. It started snowing actually yesterday, and it was like 28 degrees this morning. Fucking cold. I've been out here like a year, and I still haven't acclimated. It's fucking cold. Oh hey, you have a cone head. I was playing the long drive before I played Stray last stream. I found the cone and put it on my head. That's kind of
fucking
ironic,
weird
actually.
Supposed to be rating, but fucking sun's out, but cold.
I mean, I guess sun's out at least.
You're lucky it didn't snow
just kind of
before
cloudy
Halloween.
here, though.
Yo, I have the longest drive, ha ha ha.
Silent though. I think when I was at work, there was a day though it did snow a little bit before then. It didn't stick. I remember I was at work though, and there were a few snowflakes. It was only like for an hour or so, but it did happen.
A wild botifley appears.
And that was
catch
before
using
Halloween.
catch.
It
Winners
wasn't very
revealed in
long
90s.
before. It was like maybe a few days. It was that one day it got like super cold. I think it was within the week if I remember right. But even when I was in Oregon, I saw snow on Halloween. Here I expected though. You have the longest drive. Let's go. I haven't gotten really too much into it. I need to like sit down and like play it. Can't figure it out. Cause like I realized like every time you start a new world, it's completely different. So like I just need to like sit down, figure out how to play it, and then stream it once I know how to play it. Your longest is the 16 hours. And if we're talking real drives, my longest as a passenger was like 6 hours going from Oregon to Canada. Longest driving would be 4 hours driving from Oregon to Seattle. Other than that, the 1,000 miles that I went to get here, though, that was aeroplane. What can I do here?
I played it when it first came out, so wasn't much in it.
Ah, so they've added a lot more into it, I guess. Like I just got it, like what was it, last week? I just kind of drove a little bit. I didn't really find a whole lot because it was
Mississippi
fairly
to
barren.
Wisconsin is about 15 to 16 hour drive.
Oh damn, that's a good bit of drive
Relatively
then that way.
escaped. No one caught it.
But yeah, for the long drive though, like they added in what was it, the mutants? So there's like kind of like a Frankenstein looking person and whatnot. It's actually kind of creepy. So they're in the game too now, and I guess they'll spawn in some of the buildings or whatnot, and they're freaky as fuck. Like they were popping on YouTube left and right because one of the streamers that I'm subscribed to on YouTube, he likes to play that quite a bit. I kind of forgot what I was supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? You find a worker jacket, worker helmet to get
Oh, I
inside.
thought you were talking about actually driving.
I thought you were joking there. Now the long drive game, but then I like started talking about also like driving to Seattle. Oh hey, what's that, bud? They started talking about driving to Canada and Seattle, and that was actually driving, like real life. But then I was also talking about the long drive as well, though. So I got you both. You're only creating conversation. Alright, so I feel like I'm supposed to get inside here, but the bouncer won't let me in. There's a restocking. That's what I can't figure out. Oh, wait a minute. It's that weird feeling. Bruh. Nope, got a body. Don't lose your head about it. I think it's a little too late for that one.
Giggity, giggity, giggity. Alright.
Didn't even think of that. Oh, hey, I can go up there. Let's casually knock over a can of paint in there. Oh, I can remember something here. Just a picture.
Yeah, I forget the next couple lines, but then it goes...
Secret attic! Secret attic! In the building! Secret, 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 secret attic! Yeah! Because it's in the attic. I totally thought the cat was like biting B12 for a second there. I kind of wanted that basketball. Alright, so I think that was all I was supposed to explore up there. It doesn't link over to the other side like I hoped it would, though. I was really hoping I could get to the other side where the hats are. So I need to find myself a hat. They're too busy restocking. I can't get past this guy. What if I show you the jacket that I have? Oh wait, that's right. I'm supposed to find someone. That's right. Who am I supposed to find again? Oh wait, I'm supposed to go to the bar. Where's the bar? That's right. I'm supposed to find the bar this whole time. But I can't get in the bar because you're blocking it. Oh wait, that's right. Is there a event about this? I don't think that was it. Hmm. Oh shit. Oh, shoot me. Oh, no. So if that's closed, it means there's gotta be like a second way to get in there, but that's why I went all the way around, trying to find that open window. I didn't know what's going on with that. I think it was like rest. The other guy, I don't think he was of any help there. That didn't get me anywhere. So I'm just not sure how to get past him. Nor do I know how to get in the bar. I don't know if I can show the bouncer or something, maybe. Maybe he has an item. I only have a jacket. Let's see. What can I do too? Oh, I can rub me up against him. Let's see. Are there any ideas of something I might be missing here? I feel like I'm hitting a complete mental block here. See, I can't go into the bar though because the bar is closed. Wait, are you this guy? You can't be this guy, are you? No, you're not this guy. Me. I haven't met you yet. You're not the right person. I know you're not the right person.
Go on the main street. Look for a mannequin.
I don't know why I keep yawning. Lack of oxygen. I believe this is the main street.
It's on the left.
I was trying to think when you said it was on the left too. I know there's Twitch delay, so I don't know when
I think that
it was on the
it.
left. Wait, what? Oh crap! What was I for that? I was just saying it's a Twitch delay. You there? So I legit didn't see it.
There.
Bruh. I didn't talk to Mojo.
That shop.
So I mean, I got the jacket from him. that shop. Crap, I literally did just saw it too. Are you talking about like the clothes one? So like I already got the jacket off there, I just need the hat. And the hat I can't get into, I can't get in there because of restocking, and they think the guy's at the bar, and I can't get into
So
the
you
bar.
have the
That's my
jacket.
issue there. Yes, I have the jacket. I don't have the hat though. Because I can't get into the bar, get who's call it out of there to help this guy. So that way I can get in here because this guy keeps kicking me out of here. But yeah, like that's why I'm confused, because then this guy, he won't let me into what I believe is the bar. I mean, I think so, based on that. Unless it's supposed to go up? Based on seeing that there are little spike thingies on the air conditioners, that makes me think I can
Look
climb
for
on
the
that.
delivery
I can
truck
climb on
outside
that.
the shop.
Yep. I just put that all together just now, right when I was looking at that. It all lined up. Like if I can jump up onto here. Maybe.
Talk to robot in the vest.
So talk to him, he thinks, whoops, he thinks the other guy's in the bar. Yeah, he's been waiting for his Stuplachi to get back and help him restore his hat spots to not help you. If that guy's slacking off the bar again, he has another thing coming. It's like, then that makes me think to like get up into the bar. Like maybe like the alternate route is like up above. Something like that, just for the sole reason
Now
that,
go
like,
to the bar.
let's see, like that was here, and then like the bouncer's here. You can't get in, door's shut. I can get on top of the vending machine, and that's about it. At least I think. Because otherwise he just says the club's closed. Doesn't do anything if I show him the jacket though, besides saying like you don't take brides. What is that anyways? Unless this isn't the bar. I mean, I'm kind of going off a limb. I wasn't sure if it mattered if I meowed at him. It's off this way. Oh, it's that guy. Yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to go that way. Wait. Are you the guy? No, you're not the guy.
A wild Inky appears. Catch it using poke catch. Winners revealed
Okay,
90s.
exclamation poke catch. Yeah. I'm a cat. I'm a kitty cat. And I'm meow meow and I dance. I got that backwards. And I dance and meow meow. So I probably really have no idea where I'm going. You there! Oh, I can trip this guy too? I don't think I've tripped this one yet. What are you gonna do, arrest me? We can't. Try to see you rest me. We're gonna try and take it down every freaking we can. I got 2 for 2 with him. I expect him to fall over twice. The music changed. Why do I hear boss music? No? It's not. No, it's not boss music. It's like, did I fuck up? Is he gonna like try to hack me now? No, the music just changed a little bit. Oh, hey, wait a minute. There's the bar. This is the bar. Oh, hey, hello. Your sound bar is just close now. Wait, what?
Inkley escaped. No one caught it.
I can't show him anything. The Donnie bar stool was like, oh wait, this is a bar. Well, no, maybe not.
You should be able to get into the bar opposite the hat shop.
See, that's what I thought. Wait, hold up. Bar opposite the hat shop. Wait, is this a bar? Is this a bar? Can you pay me the real money? Hey, it doesn't appear there's really anything in here. Oh wait. This is new. Either way. Seen sell burgers and street food. Yeah, a lot more memories recovered. Wasn't either one of those guys. That one trips too easy. There's me down through the glass. I just says understood and that's it. Okay, so the clothes shop is... Okay, this is the clothes shop, but I need the hat shop. This is the bar that was like right next door to it. We're kind of behind it, basically. Should be able to get in the bar opposite the hat shop. It's not glitched, is it? Because I can't get in here. I mean, he doesn't let me in. It says the club's closed. It wasn't. I can figure out if there's anywhere I can go from up here. No, I wasn't really finding a way, like, in there. Yeah, I can't really do anything there. The first meal almost sounded like a bit of like a bark. Sometimes my cat will do that. Just whoop. She shake a sneeze.
Check if there's a back way.
So that's what I was like trying to figure out. But like, I haven't been able to figure out a way in there how to get up to like a higher place. Maybe get in somewhere that could be the back way. Oh, I thought that was a window and a robot out the window for a second. Because at first I was almost saying lay on top of the lights, but I couldn't get up there. Can't jump on top there. Let me see this. I feel like I'm just blatantly missing something. Like I see that, and it almost seems like something I would almost be able to walk across, but I can't seem to get up here. Confusion is real. I'm really stumped right now. I am not going to lie. You're of no help. B12. Tell me where the entrance is. Oh. Can't do anything about that though. Well, I could like break that down and get into it. I didn't realize I could like see myself like move in there. Like I can change my like where I'm facing in the box. I never noticed that. Just like spin around in a circle. We're gonna actually just go actually chaotic in the box. But yeah, no, I was trying to see if I could like walk very slowly in the box, maybe bounce it around, maybe get in that way, and maybe just they don't suspect it if the box just rolls in. So yes, I am delivery. So the only other place I could get into was this place, and I couldn't seem to get next door though. Wasn't way to get into the next place over. Right top of them.
Go onto the main street and look for a red sign.
Red sign.
Neon sign.
I'd like to buy some sushi. Also, the cups are floating. So confused. It seems like it's so eerie in there, but I can't get in. Computers. Unless that's not the right red sign, maybe. I have a feeling it's probably that one, but just to double check.
You're missing something obvious.
Crap. I am like trying to look at absolutely everything that. Oh wait, it's down below.
That's not it.
It's not it. I translated that.
Go to the hat shop.
Let's go to the hat. I mean, here's a red sign. Oh wow, wait, did I just never go in this one? I never went into this room, did I? Oh my god, I never went in this room. You're in here, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh my god. I just kept just not seeing the room. My brain is like, nope, it's not in there. Wow, that whole time. Good crash. Yeah, the strange feeling that's the guy in the back. That's the guy in the back. I already figured this out. We're gonna wake you up. He's incredibly drunk. Can I knock him over? I don't think so. Haha, of course I can.
A wild Buneri appears. Catch it using poke catch. Winners revealed in 90s.
Exclamation point, bogey catch. Yeah. I'm gonna get all the balls in the hole. Looks like only the pool ball was the only one that I was able to actually, or the cue ball was the only one I was able to actually, like bat around. The other ones I have to walk into them. That's what you get for trying to do the aimbot. Alright, so they're doing the thing. I already know what to do. Saw him get ready to reach that up from, or pick that up from a distance. So I'm thinking he's gonna jump in here.
Shut up and get in the car!
Shut up and get in the box. I figured it out. I'll smoke that. Cheers, bud. Sprat! Oh, I thought I could just ship out now and be like, surprise, motherfucker. No shits are given that I'm in here now. This is my carpet now.
Buniri has been caught by SpeedyFireEagle.
Let's go. Alright. Okay, so there was something to do with that. I noticed that grate earlier there, and I had a feeling about that. Alright, the hat's mine. Can I just run out, or do I have to jump back in the box? Or they're just gonna keep restocking? You can't kick me out. Cause I was leaving. Wait, where am I going? Okay, so I have those. Supposed to get in the recyclings. Where do I take these now? I did pick it up, right? Yeah, I picked it up. Trying to remember where I'm supposed to like drop it off to now. Yeah. Didn't hear him quite hit the ground there. What was back here?
Try to not get caught by the drones.
Try not to get caught by drones, got you. I haven't yet. I literally don't remember where I'm supposed to go. So I got the jacket and I got the hat. Who was it that I was talking to that even wanted them in the first place?
Find Blazer.
I'm Blazer. Was that the robot's name? Yo, it's cool with them. I got a new electric. What's it called? We can get the breed start up there though. I got electric.
Smoke weed every day.
Electric nectar collector. That's the word. Ringo burr. But it's actually super nice though. Like low temp dabs every time, or medium or high temp if I really wanted. And it's like smooth, and just like that's ready to go. No torch needed. Cheers, bud. Only 40 bucks. It's a good deal. I freaking love this thing. I always wanted like e-nail, like just so it's like because it's I mean it's convenient for one there like
Smoke.
that.
Pause.
Like is
Weed. Pause. Every. Pause. Day.
pause. I don't expect to pause at the end of it. But yeah, no, this thing is like it's super nice. Freaking love this thing. Well, they can't figure out how to play pool. Oh, he's got a tiny screen in his head.
Cat
Did I just
equals
hack
evil.
this? I mean, like, I almost took the life of 2 more robots. This one here. Okay, he's fine this time. Where's the other one? There's another one around here somewhere. Ah! Okay, they're not doing it this time. But it made them like literally fall on their face a few times, and the first time like it just threw me off. I was like, oh what just happened? What? But I'm supposed to find. I think basically my mission giver. I don't remember who. I don't remember where I'm supposed to go. I think Silent said earlier. What was it? What was it? Kisa, I see you in the Discord. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Here. I got somewhere as well, like you said, go somewhere, hat shop. Trying to kind of find Blazer. Okay, so it's find Blazer. Is that one of these guys? Simon? I don't know. Probably not. Doubt it. Up top maybe? I think it was up here. It's take me a minute. Hello. You're not the right person. Maybe you are.
Emma
You wanna
DM you
be
2
a
pics in
cat
a sec.
worker?
Speedy, tell me which one I should buy. Fissert. Bad financial desi science.
Bad financial decisions. I got you. All right. Do you just saying, asking ahead of time? Do you care if I put it on share screen, or do you want to keep it off screen? To ask you ahead of time, basically. Is it in here? I forget if there was someone in here. Ah, hat. Maybe. Track down that atomic battery outside of my fence.
No, I don't care. Twitch mic, so up to your. You asterisk.
Got you. I'm assuming it was like about a car or a truck, right? Well, I guess I don't have Discord open my computer at the moment though, so I just have to bring it up on my phone. But otherwise, I am constantly like lost playing this game, like not knowing who's where and what to go, where to go. So I don't think it was in there. Wasn't it? This guy up
Look
here.
for an alley on the right for the Nico Corporation.
On the right for the, From the Nico Corporation, I got you.
No, sharp objects.
Ah, I got you. Yeah, I guess seeing like that they're like knives or whatnot. I mean, I guess it depends.
It's on the
I don't know,
main
it should
street.
be alright, but I mean, I guess I don't know. It's on the main street. I got you. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean, they look legal. If that's what you mean. I like the look of the first one though.
LOL.
I say the
you
first
okay
one,
there?
the one that's all black.
Talking like Biden.
What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm also like a little congested. I don't know why today. It's been like super like cold out. I did have caffeine earlier, but I'm also tired at the same time, so it's like I'm awake but sleepy. And stoned. I'm freaking baked actually. Cause I mean they're freaking with this like new like electric this new electric nectar collector. Like I mean like it's just so easy to take a dab now. Like I can just take a dab. You know I hear it now. Yeah, no, I'm fucking baked. I think that's what it is. And I am freaking.
LOL.
This
and
cat's.
Yay,
I'm about
wait,
to
you
freaking.
ho, that's cow.
What?
LMAO.
Yeah. What? The freaking text to speech said that weirdly fast instead of slow.
You.
Yo, Rat Race, what's up? How you doing? Welcome back. That's weird. It says first time chat, but weren't you in here last stream too, though?
Yay, wait, you ho, that's cow.
But yo, what's up?
That also explains why you're lost in game.
Huh? Yeah. Yeah, no, that definitely explains
At
why I'm lost in game, because I am fucking
from a
baked.
broken rubber.
Yeah.
Doing God, bro. And yeah, I was.
Okay, so that's what I thought, 'cause
Wait,
yeah,
what?
for sure, like, first time chat. It's like, that shouldn't be, like, first time chat, though. Then... Oh, hey, wait, so, like, oh, so Expo, you do know him. I couldn't remember.
Broken
Expo freaking
Rubber
knows
XD.
everyone, though. If you forgot Grant, or if not Grant Turismo, Beam or Seto, you'll find him. I've been trying to get into like the no headsy servers a lot more on Seto though.
Ye Eve seen him multiple
I don't know if I'd
places.
be able to like ever stream some of that though, because like the freaking CPU usage is like over
Playing
the top.
Beam tonight. I think.
I mean, I'm. Oh, it's only 5 o'clock. Holy
Also,
shit!
I
It's
hope-
hell early still. Freaking, I thought it was like freaking 9 o'clock with Toki. Oh, that's Maddie. Hi, Maddie. Hey, Maddie, you fell for the trap.
Beam
You came
equals
here.
life.
For real though, but like instead of course it has its moments too. What? You always try to run away every time. I got you. I got you. Here we go. So here's kitty number 2. This is Maddie. Friggin' got it. Tab out. Oh, of course it goes silent because it's off the game. And bam,
I'm
second
gonna
camera.
be on for like another
Ta-da.
5 to 6 hours, so LMK.
Ooh. Sounds good. Dude, I might almost be tempted because like I was thinking about like I had an idea for just a little bit of like after Stray anyways, doing a little bit of a playthrough of Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, but like I had an idea like for example like start with the 2 lowest units or whatnot, lose the team, gets the next better unit, can't build up until there's like all the units on there, just kind of make an epic battle. Yeah, just kind of like a stoned idea. It's like that actually kind of be kind of cool, like kind of do that. Maybe you can put that on YouTube or whatnot. Which then again, like even Stray stuff. I mean, I'm putting that on YouTube too, though. Like when I cut that in, like the highlights or whatnot. That's gonna like download that or whatnot and kind of like trim it to. I don't know how many episodes to do. Like whether I do like just 2 or 4 or whatnot, depending if I even finish this tonight. So I
A
keep
wild
getting
charge
stuck.
bug appears. Catch it using
Speaking of, I was
hook
supposed
catch.
to
Winners
do
revealed
what
in 90s.
again? Next we'll see multiple places. Freaking Expos everywhere though too. Freaking either Expo sees everyone, everyone sees Expo. Let's see, it's on the main street.
At Raytrix X, you don't
So I'm
have a
supposed to
trainer
go- yeah, I'm
pass
in the
yet.
wrong
Enter.
place,
Hope
for
Star
sure.
to get your starter Pokemon.
Let's see, where again am I supposed to go to? I'm on the main street. I'm supposed to look for person, right? It's none of these guys. Don't think it's those guys. Not those.
Heading out. Have a good stream, bro.
Alright, sounds good. Oh, a rat race too, though. If you want to do exchange point Poke Start, though, then you get like little starter Pokemon. That starter, the Pokemon goes with you everywhere
At
you
X
go,
Rat
too.
Race X,
If you do
CYA
that.
man.
But otherwise, they'll have a good one though. Plus, it's a little, it's a good little fun thing to actually attach into the stream too. It's a good thing, or a little extension to look into. A lot of people have actually been using that, like a lot more actually lately. Like, almost
Be
like
lurking, bro. Getting
I'd say
coffee
like
and
half
shit.
from like more of them though. Oh, let's go. Sounds good. Very. I haven't had good coffee in a while. That's one thing I miss about Oregon. It's like they have some good coffee shops out there in the West Coast. Out here, I mean, there's some
Charge a bug escaped.
alright ones, but like
No one caught it.
vanilla chai tea just doesn't hit the same out here as it did out there, though. The goose was that. How you doing? I am lost as fuck. I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to. I've been trying to figure it out. I've been wandering around. I keep tripping these
We have a
robots.
black
Or
rock
trying to,
literally in
anyways.
our parking lot.
Then yeah, the like, see, like
It's
the good
perfect.
coffee. I mean, here.
I'm sorry, but can someone please tell me
I
what
have
is
to
so good about
drive
coffee? Pause.
Caffeine.
I hate it.
I mean, I open in the morning, so like sometimes I have to run on that. If I can't get an energy drink, I mean drive through. Sometimes for me, it's just pure convenience. But I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's just mainly caffeine. Usually, I just gotta like,
Noise.
I gotta find the right one though. But like the chai tea latte though, I just like how that one tastes. To be honest, that one like really though,
I
like
don't
it
drink
like
coffee.
relaxes me. It
The
makes me
acid
like
makes
fall
me
asleep.
violently ill. I get the Mai Tai fuel.
My chai fuel. Oh, isn't wait, what did you say again? Wasn't that
But it tastes so bad, in my opinion.
You see, that's gotta put enough creamer in it. I'm trying to remember what the Mai Tai fuel was. Was that like the Red Bull mix stuff? I forget, to be honest. You know, I feel like I've had that. I feel like I've heard it back when I lived out there. I just don't even remember.
Look for the alley next to the clothes shop.
Alley next to the clothes shop. Thank you. I appreciate you. Clothes shop. No, hat shop. Clothes shop, clothes shop, clothes shop, clothes shop, clothes shop. Wrong way. Clothes shop, clothes shop, clothes shop. Where's clothes shop?
The Mai
Clothes
Tai
shop.
fuel is mango lime
There's
and
an
another
alleyway.
flavored syrup, OJ, and their fuel energy drink.
This way? Mango nut flavored. Oh, okay. I feel like I've maybe had that once. It sounds like something I would drink. I don't think it's back here. I already
It's
checked out that
delicious.
spot. Wait, can I look at this now? Freaking sound good. Freaking there's like a juice I got right now. It's just peach or mango peach, but like freaking tastes amazing. And I actually did get a vape juice that was actually peaches and cream. So it's like vanilla peach, and it actually did smell pretty good. I haven't actually had a chance to put it in here yet though, because I haven't ran this tank out. But I've been kind of like a peach and mango kick lately. I wonder if it's the other alleyway.
Whoa, D-Horse looks
You're
different.
Blazer. You're the one that wanted this in the first place. Oh my god, I ran past you so many times. I need to just, like, let's hold in the very beginning. Be slow, pay attention to everything. I need to remember names now. Oh man. Oh man. So I got you that. Still need that. Yep, I got you that. Good to go. Oh, do the trick. And turning around, I was like, do I legit have to actually turn around now? No, I just blackened the screen.
This
The cat
isn't
did
the
not turn
game's
around.
fault.
The cat did not turn around. It's in the game's fault. Yeah, no, it's definitely my fault. I'm stoned as fuck. No, I blame me. It was game all user error. Yes, it was me. Like that silent meow. I swear there's no meow there. Wait, what was this supposed to? Jump in this box. I was not paying attention. I was really hoping it could meow from the box. Not from this cutscene. Wait, Goose, did I show you the new electric nectar collector? It's new and it's efficient.
Also,
I've taken so many dabs, barely smoked any dab even. Low temp, same temp every time. Only 40 bucks in the
robots
smoke shop
capable
out
of
here.
deception.
Capable of deception. That's what I was saying, is like the ones getting arrested. It wasn't me. I feel like there's an error program there. I feel like they would know which one it is. Meantime, exclamation point 420, choose button.
Say electric nectar collector 5 times fast.
Right? Electric nectar collector. Well, I mean, I probably can't say that fast times. Electric nectar collector, electric nectar collector, electric nectar collector, electric nectar. Yeah, no. Maybe if I'm not stoned. Maybe if I'm not stoned. Maybe. Electric nectar collector. It just weirdly just. It rolls off the tongue in a weird way. Ooh. Don't get caught by the robots. I almost just said, if I've learned anything from video games, stay out of that light. I understand what the box is for now. I don't need to be in here right now. Maybe, oh shit. Yes, I definitely need to be in there. Oh fuck. Hello there.
You get an achievement if you don't get caught.
Did that count as getting caught? I don't know if he knows I'm here. Is he gonna go away? I don't know what to do. He doesn't see me. I'm behind the wall. But it seems like he kinda knows I'm here more so. Like, I feel like he's not gonna go away. Man, yeah, that's right. The robot's got me, I think. See, because I gotta run that. Unless I gotta be quick. But I gotta avoid those too. Oh, fuck. I fucked up. Gotta go right now. Gotta go. Oh, gotta go. Oh, fuck, I fucked up. Gotta go right now. Gotta go. Oh, no.
Run.
That was so much worse than I thought it would be. Holy crap. What just happened? This is all we're like, we got you down, motherfucker. What? I was not anticipating that. No, right? I was definitely in danger. Oh my god.
Use
I
the
thought
boxes.
there were so many of them. I didn't see any. There was so many lights.
I guess you're not getting the achievement.
I don't think so. No, I think they caught me. Oh fuck! And that's like what? Oh, I got one more life. I'm on like life number 8. I got one more life, and then I'm on my 9th life. Alright, so avoid the fuck out of this one. Wait for him to come back. I didn't get hit by him the first time. Oh, excuse me. I didn't get hit by him the first time. I don't think there was anyone over here, so I don't know how the fuck I got caught that first time. Alright, use the boxes. Box! Now I know. The other one didn't respond to that before. Okay. Don't meow at them. Alright, I gotta resist the urge. Can't meow. Run.
This reminded me of the old Toy Story game.
Right. I think I played that back in like the PlayStation 1? Ha, I made it. I don't think I'm out of the clear though. No, I'm not out of the clear. There's another one over there. You look like you just look left and right. Left to the left. Ah. Ooh, that was close. I didn't know if he's gonna see me or not. I'm trying to get on that other ledge. Tried so hard not to meow. It's so hard not to meow there. Okay, I could do this. I opened that door, okay.
I love how this game turns from into a cute cat game to scary robot game in a second.
Right? I mean, it's like I just can't. The moment I was at the door, like, how did I get here? Now I'm doing puzzles. Run. Oh, okay. Oh, that's a robot. I didn't know what I was looking at for a second there. Does he care? Oh wait, I see what I'm supposed to do.
Run.
Run. Oh, the timing. The freaking timing of that was actually perfect. Could go there.
Yeah, I forget the next couple lines, but then it goes.
Secret tunnel! Secret tunnel! Through the mountains! Secret tunnel! Yeah! Wow, I was running fast as fuck, boy! I didn't realize he literally does a slide. You freaking actual 360 while running like that. Oh, tail's up in the air.
Still fast as fuck,
Still fast, fuck, boy. It's my can at 3 AM. Oh, I already know how to do this. I'll say it'd probably be deadly if I ran into that, maybe not if I do this. Maybe. Yeah. Why do I see it? Stranger Things vibe suddenly.
The music gives ST vibes.
Right? That was my very first thought, Stranger Things. Okay,
A Wildclef area appears catch it using poke catch winners revealed in 90s.
So that's from the other side.
B12 has a friend.
Right? He's got a buddy. Also, it's the fairy. It's Pikachu! I had to think about that.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
Fuck!
I don't think about that. I was like, wait, it's Pikachu!
It finally happened.
It finally happened.
Clip
can
that.
type. right? I was trying to do Ultra Ball though, because I actually was trying to catch that though. Uptime. That 2 hours and 41 minutes. That'll be the time slot for that one as well.
At
Oh,
not
you-
underscore
the same
full
thing,
purchase
that's
successful.
Let's go. Oh wait, I'm supposed to be on top of the other one too. Wait, what? Hold up.
2 hours 40 minutes and 40 seconds.
20, 40, 40. Stay there.
Clef Airy has been caught by SpeedyFireEagle, not underscore Spol.
Let's go. Wow, that drops hella quick. Something else I could drop here. Wait, how to get you out of here?
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
I'm so lost and confused again. Does this turn off lasers? Where do you get the barrel through? Oh wait, hold up. Anything up here? No. Wait, maybe that coffee cup is just heavy enough. Hold up. I doubt it, but maybe. Gotta be smart. Be a true cat, do cat things. Bop this around all over the whole damn living room. Come on now. Ah! Come on. I'm gonna laugh if this actually works. Oh, damn it! Oh. Bruh. Was it supposed to do that? Did I glitch it? I don't know what went wrong. Here's how
LOL.
to... So I'm here, and there's nothing to place here as far as I know. Besides the other guy. I think it's the same as if he parks in all the same ones. Or am I supposed... Is there anything in here I'm supposed to change while this is open? No. So what if I leave you this one? Nothing? What happens if I leave you this one? There's still a problem here. Can't really get it across that easy. Wait. Yeah, no, I don't. Sorry.
You need the barrel.
That's why I'm confused, because I... Trying to figure out how to use the barrel, though. How to get that to come into play, because I can't get it onto the other pad. I can't get this to actually, like... Oh! Oh, too far. Come here. And this needs to be over here. Okay, I'm so glad that didn't actually take me out. It just made me jump. That made me jump actually quite a bit too, though. Okay, hold up. I have an idea. I have a blip. Oh, that did not work. I don't know if this thing will be able to like move it over. Got yeeted straight up. I don't think that's gonna make it roll down. Also, that's actually still solid glass there. Now look at that. So that's the battery. How do I... So this is why I'm like, I need that other one that's over there. How the hell do I get into here though to get this guy out? Is there another entryway that's like in there that I'm not seeing? Up top. Wait, hold up. You, come here. What's on top of you? Jump up here. Ha 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 ha. There we go. You cats, what do you gotta do? Alright, this one's on. Alright, switch, open the door. I figured it out. There we go. This just got so much easier. It's like I'm just not. Something was not right. I couldn't figure out what it was. And this one needs to go here. Yes. And this one now can go across here. There we go. That I am. Wow. I am speed bait. That took me a minute to figure that out. Oh, I don't think that entirely worked. As to be expected. Run? You got it. Quick, let's get out of here before the Centennial show up. Alright, where? This way? Yes. I was trying to think real quick the Indiana Jones theme song going through the bucket. I'm thinking this way?
Run.
I'm not entirely sure which way I'm supposed to go. You're not the right person at all. I think that was somewhere I could have slept though, but I don't think this is the time. Maybe? Doesn't seem like there's an active threat. Yet. Straight, yeah, I gotta go to Clementine. Crap, where was Clementine? I'm noticing more and more of the police. Where did I go before? Looks like some people moved around. I don't think Clementine was in the bar. I'm not sure that wasn't that one guy. That was like Buster or whatever his name was. That's right, there's nothing here. Yeah, it's hard remembering where everyone is. See, if only there's like a map. No, there's not. I had to press M on the keyboard just to make sure. Let's see. Clementine. I know I was like talking to Clementine earlier for missions. Can't remember who it was now. They're in the regular building, or if it was that one that was up top. Like that really tall one. That robot keeps tripping on me. Does this one too now? No, he can trip. It's not there. Not here. Excuse me. See. It's one of those obvious I'm missing it blatantly again things I'm betting. Because I don't quite remember when I got to where Clementine was. I don't think I could come in here before though. Relentless. I can't scratch that door. I think that's just the memory that was in there. Let's see. I don't think Clementine was in here now. Alright, you looked up there. I don't think there was anywhere to go down here. What is this? Oh, okay, that's what Clementine looks like. That's right, you were sitting down in a room. Where was that room? I don't remember now. Now I'm paying attention, those are the pictures of Clementine. I'm assuming Clementine's gonna be maybe in the same spot. Maybe. How did I get there?
I wonder if that robot is a Portal Easter egg. It reminded me of it.
Never know, I mean, it could be. It's been so long since I've played Portal.
A wild sandile appears, catch it using poke catch, winners revealed in 90s.
Ooh, Sandile, exclamation point catch. Yeah. The brains are going blur so much with trying to figure out where people
I've never
are.
played Portal.
I played the first one once. Or not like once, but a few times. It's interesting. It's another kind of puzzle game, but like, I mean, yeah, you got one portal, like entrance to the next portal. I mean, you can like go all sorts of places. It gets real confusing, like trying to figure out like just the different dimensions. It's definitely worth a try if you've never played it though. It definitely makes you think, though. I'm so lost. Do we want to pause here for Shiri?
Remind me to DM you a video of the
trying to yawn, but,
creators reacting to a speedrun.
Ooh, sounds good. For Portal or for Stray? But I was gonna say, I might pause here for Stray though. Switch up the game, just kind of get fresh eyes this next time since I'm just like stuck.
Portal.
I don't know why I can't remember where this is though. Oh, for Portal. I don't know if I've seen
Sandile
speedrun Portal.
escaped.
I'd be curious about that.
No one caught it.
He's super fast. He's just running the whole time. Like probably non-stop running actually. But yeah, otherwise though, what was it? I had a few other games in here. 8 minutes since the last checkpoint. Wow. Also, I don't think there was a way to manually save that. That's right. It was always just based off the checkpoints, so I haven't found anything new, so I guess nothing lost. But
I'm okay
let's see.
with switching.
Today's Wednesday. I'm just thinking, like, I'm not shutting down stream at all or anything. We're still going for quite a while. Yeah, we've still got like 3-4 hours still, anyways. But I'm just thinking next time I'll be able to get more Stray in, because today is
At Silent
Wednesday, so
Chariot
maybe tomorrow if I'm not like dead tired. Friday not so much. Otherwise Saturday. I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. We got a few days. We can figure that out.